everybody. I'm going to squirt my crown. It's very uncomfortable though, so keep it up here, over here. You can see it a little bit. Just a reminder, please, everybody wear their masks when you go out. Hold on just a second. Okay, today I'm going to talk about Death of the Liberal Class by Hedges. And, you know, basically the oh my goodness, hold on, this isn't plugged in. Okay, I should have enough battery. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, so basically the Democrats and the liberals all over in Europe is the same thing. Everywhere else I've lived, like yesterday I did Rianne Eisler, I'm a Chalice and the Blade, and she was saying, you know, how, you know, she had lived, went from Austria to Cuba and then the United States, and how this had, you know, opened her eyes to a lot of things, and I agree. You know, I have the same rhetoric as her and everything like that, but see, this gets in, I guess, where to having it all, because yeah, you know, I traveled the world, I raised my kids, I dedicated myself to my husband and his career, and I mean, that's a totally important work that needs to be done in this world, and the denigration that it's getting is disgusting, and you'll see some of it in here. So, you know, and then afterwards, I got back to, okay, I've done independent study because I've been thrown out with nothing and everything like that. But if anybody, I think any of my teachers can attest, when I was a child and an adolescent particularly, I didn't need to go back to school to know what to study. I've done my independent research. I mean, and it's impeccable. I mean, this whole thing, that since I don't have an MBA or PhD and haven't been in their little game, is ridiculous. I mean, I did a lot of stuff, not just raising my children, but, you know, let's see, I lived 3 times in Paris for a total of 4 years. What was it? 4 years in Brussels, a total of 7 years, I think it was, in Madrid between 90 and then we came back in 2003, and then 6 years in Bogota. And I was very active. You know, I didn't hang out at the country club like all of these HR people and everything are contending. I mean, the idea that all of the different things that I did as a trophy wife, I mean, we did the job of HR, you know, event planning, cooking, cleaning, childcare, psychologist. I mean, you name it, and all sorts of people are getting lots of money for this, but since I didn't, you know, opt into the game, I'm excluded. So, let me, before I start with this, I'm going to play this presentation about the Sustainable Development Goals, because I want you to kind of think about this. How are we going to have that with the sellout from the left?
Hi guys. Do you have time for a few quick questions? I see you're having a lot of fun, but do you ever stop and think if what you do is sustainable? And do you know what sustainable development means? Sustainable development is to make the world a better place for everyone now without destroying the possibilities for the next generations. If you wonder if something is sustainable, you can ask yourself, can we do this over and over again forever? Sustainable development means that we need to keep 3 things in mind at once: social progress, economic development, and climate and environment. First of all, we have to take care of our planet. We have many natural ecosystems that must be in balance in order for us to live here. The climate system is one of them. This system ensures that the temperature is correct and that the atmosphere emits exactly the right amount of solar energy. When we emit harmful greenhouse gases such as CO2, we clog the atmosphere. This changes the temperatures on Earth, which again affects our development. How we produce and use energy is incredibly important. Oil and coal are examples of energy we may run out of. Water, wind, and sun, however, will always be here. Using the lasting sources of energy that renew themselves is good for the planet and can provide jobs for years to come. Economics. Almost everything we develop, buy, and trade starts with nature. The smarter we use our natural resources, and the better systems we create for a fair distribution, the more sustainable we are. One way to contribute to a more uneven distribution is to be more aware of what we buy and how it is produced. A football is a good example. It travels far before it reaches the football players. First, materials are made. Then, they print the logo somewhere else before a third country sews it all together. One single football sees the whole world before it reaches its goal. This journey ties us together. If we are to win the battle for a sustainable future, we have to play with fair rules that applies to everyone. Social progress. We humans are part of nature, but we're also important resources for the world. Just like water, the forest, and the sun, we have minds that can create the strangest and most creative things. But for us to be the best versions of ourselves, there are certain things that must be in order, like having equal opportunities to education, safety, food, and medicine. This provides greater opportunities for us as human beings, but also for the planet. We just have to think in new ways. These three must work together. That is sustainable development. And there is actually a plan for this. All the countries of the United Nations have agreed on a joint plan for sustainable development.
Everybody's got a plan.
But for the plan to work, we need to cooperate, and we need you to be on board. Are you with us?
It would be great if these people would watch their own videos, because really they are in total denial. Okay, so I'm going to start with, oh, where'd you go?
Sustainable
So anyway, you know, the liberal class, yeah, is dead. They all sold out, and now they're playing the same game that the conservatives have been playing forever. You know, oh, we want capitalism, we want free, free trade and fair rules and all of that stuff. But then behind closed doors, they're manipulating everything and it's traditionally been for the white, the privileged whites in the United States. And of course, after the civil rights movement, I guess they figured out, particularly with the Koch brothers and all of their, ideas to move back to the 1930s and another world war, well, we'll have to let we got to let them in, the blacks, the browns, and everybody, and the yellows, and everybody else, the reds. Otherwise, we will have rioting and everything like that. So what we're going to do is, restructure the favoritism game. And, let the people in, what you have to make sure that they're brown nosers and they won't make waves and everything like that. And that's basically what they've been doing in Washington for the past 50 years, 60 years. And this again, managerialism. Burnham showed it's not communism versus capitalism that is the problem, it's managerialism. And even we'll see with the trickle down, this whole supply side, that's communism. That's the government and the oligarchs and everything like that, the big corporations, deciding what's going to be produced for the consumers rather than the demand of the consumers, deciding what is going to be produced by the supply side. And that's just created havoc, particularly since you have a ruling elite that is narcissistic, entitled, and just couldn't care about anybody but themselves. And so they're turning a blind eye to all of the corruption. Again, they did it in the Gilded Age, was the Golden Age. The Roaring Twenties, is the cocaine snorting and everything like that. And that's where the whole, we're going to be liberals. We're going to do drugs all over the place. We're going to fornicate all over the place. It was disgusting in the 80s. I'm sorry, but, I've always been a liberal and everything like that, and I'm not this, no sex before marriage and all of that stuff. But there's a huge difference between that and going out anywhere and everywhere. I mean, God, it was, the whole frat house scene has not changed. Check out Animal House. That's what still we're living in. So, anyway, I'll start with the death of the liberal class. You couldn't stay in Oakwood, Texas and have a job, he adds. Bell moved to, Bell moved to upstate New York 2 years ago after leaving the Marine Corps to be near Cheyenne, his 3-year-old daughter. He and the girl's mother are separated. Bell found work as a carpenter with a traveling construction crew. He earned $14.15 an hour and could sometimes make as much as $800 a week. Then the financial meltdown knocked the wind out of the local economy. Everybody in my apartment building has had their hours cut, are unemployed, or have taken minimum wage jobs, he said. I was laid off last year. I tried to find work as an independent carpenter. I don't have health insurance. The dearth of work, which left him attempting to survive at times on $600 a month, saw him enlist last year in the New York National Guard, even though it means almost certain deployment to Afghanistan. The enticement of a $20,000 signing bonus was too lucrative to pass up. The National Guard, until he joined recently, returned from a tour in Afghanistan. We are training to go back to Afghanistan, he says. The fact that they are still using Army National Guard, state-level troops to police the streets of Afghanistan is no good. These units are really overstretched. We do not get the benefits. We don't get health insurance like active duty military, but the Guard gets deployed just as much. Some of these guys have been on 3 and 4 tours. I got out of the Marine Corps and I went back to Texas for 10 months and was involved in the John McCain campaign, he says. I really got disillusioned with the neoconservatism. I'd never been involved in politics. The idea that we needed all these troops all around the world, defending freedom, as they call it, we were actually engaging in nation building and supporting special interests that drive these wars, was something I began to understand. As far as foreign and economic policy, I could see there was no difference between the two main political parties. There is a false left-right paradigm which diverts the working class from the real reasons for their hardships. The winters in New York State are really hard, Bell says. There are less jobs and the heating costs are high. I pay about $200 a month for electric and gas. I live really cheap. I don't have cable. I don't go out or spend money that is not necessary. It is a struggle. But at least I have not had to devote 40 hours a week to a minimum wage job that does not pay me a living wage. People here are really hurting. The real underemployment rate must be at least 20%. A lot of people are working part-time jobs when they want full-time jobs. There are many people like me, independent contractors and small business owners, who can't file for unemployment insurance. Unemployment coverage is not available to me because I worked as a 1099, a self-employed contractor, even when I worked for the construction company. People are scared, he says. They want to live their lives, raise their children, and be happy. That is not possible. They don't know if they can make their next mortgage payment. They see their standard of living going down. Bell says he and those around him are being pushed off the edge. He says he fears the social and political repercussions. I hope there is a populist revolution, he says. We have to take the corporate bailouts and the money we are sending overseas and use that money in our communities. If this does not happen, there will be more anger and eventually violence. When people lose everything, they start to lose it. When you can't find a job, even though you look repeatedly, it leads to things like random shooting and suicides. We will see acts of domestic terrorism. The state will erode more of our civil liberties to control mass protests. We are seeing some students protest, but we will see them on a wider scale. I hope the protests will be constructive. I hope people will not resort to extreme measures, but people will do what they have to do to survive. This may mean things like food riots. The political establishment better work very fast to take the pressure off. Now, this book was 2010. Oh, and yesterday I was reading from Friedan Beyond Gender. That one was in 97. It was her other, The Second Stage, which was 81. Anyway, anger and a sense of betrayal. These are what Ernest, Logan, Bell, and tens of millions of other disenfranchised workers express. These emotions spring from the failure of the liberal class over the past 3 decades to promote the minimal interest of the working and middle class as corporations dismantled the democratic state, decimated the manufacturing sector, looting the U.S. Treasury, waged imperial wars that can neither be afforded nor won, and gutted the basic laws that protected the interest of ordinary citizens. Yet the liberal class continued to speak in the prim and obsolete language of policies and issues. It refuses to defy the corporate assault. A virulent right wing, for this reason, captures and expresses the legitimate rage articulated by the disenfranchised. And the liberal class has become obsolete, even as it clings to its positions of privilege within liberal institutions. This is exactly how Trump got in. People were tired of the law, the lies and everything. When Obama got in, I came back in 2009, I said, what does he think, he has a magic wand? It's all just a bunch of blah, 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 blah. And nobody implements. Not at the national level, and we'll see not at the international level. And it's because the ruling elite are narcissistic and couldn't care about anybody. And the old guard American ruling elite has just been joined by the international community. And they're creating a cesspool, all of them in Washington. And you'll see this gets into a protection racket. Anybody who wants to rain on their little cushy parade is going to be ostracized with Sati games and all of that stuff, and widow burning and all of that crap. Classical liberalism was formulated largely as a response to the dissolution of feudalism and church authoritarianism. It argued for non-interference and independence under the rule of law. But that's the thing, rule of law. And we've lost that. So, it's just chaos. People, they're being told, oh, your rights are going to be respected. This is the great country of everybody's rights is respected, equal rights for everybody. Then you get into this system and you go, you people are crazy. Nobody has any rights anywhere. It incorporates a few aspects of ancient Athenian philosophy as expressed by Pericles and the Sophists, but with philosophical systems that marked a radical rupture with both Aristotelian thought and medieval theology. Classical liberalism has, the philosopher John Gray writes, 4 principal features or perspectives, which give it a recognizable identity. It is individualistic in that it asserts the moral primacy of the person against any collectivity. So I'll get back into this individualistic. Uh, Everybody's interpreting individualistic of anarchy. I can do whatever I want. No, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't infringe upon the rights of others around you. But that doesn't mean, I just can do whatever I want because I'm top of the heap. So egalitarian. In that it confirms on all human beings the same basic moral status. Well, that's not happening. Universalist, affirming the moral unity of the species. That's not happening. And meliorist, in that it asserts the open-ended improvability by use of critical reason on human life. Well, that's not happening. They talk about sustainable development goals, but everybody in this town is materialistic, narcissistic, consume, and I want to grapple up to the top, and, too bad for anybody I step on. So, let's see, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Baruch Spinoza laid the foundation for classical liberalism. And people are looking at the World Bank, they do on all of this online, training and courses and everything like that, and it goes into all of this. But, this is stuff that people should have learned, if not in secondary school, definitely in their bachelor level. And because the IMF, it's $330 million a year for their BS training, but the World Bank, it's $730 million, I think, for nothing, absolutely nothing. Except blah, 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 blah. The work of these theorists was expanded in the 18th century by the Scottish moral philosophers, the French philosophes, and the early architects of American democracy. The philosopher John Stuart Mill redefined liberalism in the 19th century to call for the redistribution of wealth and the promotion of the welfare state. The liberal era, which flourished in the latter part of the 19th century and the early years of the 20th, was characterized by the growth of the mass movement and social reforms that addressed working conditions in factories, the organizing of labor unions, women's rights, universal education, housing for the poor, public health campaigns, and socialism. This liberal era effectively ended with World War I, the war which shattered liberal optimism about the inevitability of human progress. Also consolidated state and corporate control over economic, political, cultural, and social affairs. It created mass culture, fostered through the consumer society, the cult of the self, led the nation into an era of permanent war, and used fear and mass propaganda to cow citizens and silent, independent, and radical voice within the liberal class. FDR's New Deal, put in place only when the capitalist system collapsed, was the final political gasp of the classical liberalism in the United States. The New Deal reforms, however, were systematically dismantled in the years after World War II, often with the assistance of the liberal class. Okay, now I'm going to show you the trickle down, because this gets us to almost to the point of trickle down. I mean, okay, we jump the civil rights, the 60s and 70s, but we had the backlash after that, and this was a return, oh, come on, to basically, the 1930s, trying to bring us back to the golden age and of white supremacy and everything like that. Oh gosh, wait a second, I lost it. Hold on. There.
I'm joined today by Steve Horowitz, who is the Charles A. Dana Professor of Economics at St. Lawrence University and currently a visiting scholar at the John H. Schnatter Institute for Entrepreneurship and Free Enterprise at Ball State University. It's so great to talk to you. You have this fascinating article about how trickle-down economics isn't a thing. And when I read the title alone, I thought, oh, that's fantastic. Steve thinks that the concept of trickle-down economics is bogus. But then upon reading more about your views, it turns out that what you really mean is that there are no serious economists who use the term and say that there is such a thing as trickling down. And I want to open it up to you to sort of make that case, but the way I'm approaching it is, isn't this sort of semantics? We're talking about supply-side economics. You're just saying that name is not something economists use.
Well, I think I'm saying two things. I think that's one thing, right? That professional economists don't use that phrase. That phrase is one of those classic ones that's invented by the critics of a position to describe it. But the second thing I'm saying is that the idea that seems to be in the critic's mind of trickle-down economics, the idea that somehow if we give things to the rich in particular, we cut their taxes or we favor them with subsidies or something like that, that somehow making the rich richer or letting the rich be rich will, quote, trickle down and improve the lives of the poor. I think that's not true either. No. In other words, no economist, I shouldn't say no, there's almost no economist who believe that. There's almost you can find an economist who believes in almost anything, but very few economists believe that. That's not what I think. No one thinks that's how the economy grows, is by sort of giving things to rich people and somehow they magically make their way down to everybody else.
Well, no, but it's not usually claimed as magic, right? I mean, the way that a supply sider might talk through the logic is, okay, if you reduce taxes on the very rich, they now have more money, and since they run the businesses, they'll now be encouraged because they'll have more money to put more money into their business, and that means in part hiring people, presumably people in the lower middle or lower middle classes, and that's going to create jobs, it's going to circulate more money into the economy. Isn't that sort of the idea?
It might be, but there's so many fallacies wrapped up in that story that it's hard to know where to begin. Okay, so I do think, first of all, I don't see any serious economists arguing that we want to just give tax breaks to the very rich. Right? Most people, supply-siders even, would say we want to cut taxes across the board. That was the Kemp-Roth cuts in the Reagan years. So if the idea is when we free up the economy in general across the board, freer economies produce more wealth, and that wealth works its way across the entire economy. So it's this idea that somehow if we favor the rich in particular, they'll do all these things, the things that you described, which again, I think there's problems there too, that it's not just a matter of the rich sort of, if they have more money, they'll do all these things. You need to have an economy that's driven by entrepreneurship and free enterprise. That's what makes wealth spread to everyone. And as I argue in that piece, it's hardly a trickle historically. It's been a flood when we have genuinely free enterprise.
Don't you think, though, that you could actually make the case, so I think we both agree that just giving tax cuts to the rich is not the way to stimulate an economy most effectively, and you sort of referred to the idea of across-the-board tax cuts. But it's pretty widely documented that $1 in tax cut does not have the same impact by giving it to someone at the very top of the income range than someone who is towards the bottom. And the concept of a marginal propensity to consume sort of illuminates this pretty clearly. If you earn $20,000 a year and you have an extra dollar now that you're not paying in taxes, there's a much higher chance that you need that dollar for your day-to-day subsistence and will spend it in a way that it will have an economic multiplier that would far exceed if someone earns $300,000 a year and now they have one extra dollar. The odds that the $300,000 earner needs that extra dollar rather than just sticking it in a bank account is far lower, isn't it?
Except, again, a couple problems with that argument. First of all, just sticking it in a bank account is a good thing. Put it in a bank account, that becomes savings, that gets transferred.
Okay, because it does get a little convoluted there. But however, this brings up the thing, put it into a bank account and savings. Has anybody looked at the savings account, what they're paying these days? I mean, when I worked in the stock market in the 80s, the money market funds, which you could liquidate from one day to the other for the clients, were paying around 5% or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but then the savings would have been a bit higher, maybe a 0.5% or maybe a bit more than that. But it was paying something, so there was an incentive to save. Now savings accounts aren't paying anything, so there's no incentive to save. And of course, that's, this gets all into conspiracy theory. Is there somebody up there, moving all of the strings, or just some of them, and then it has these derivative effects, which is what's happening. And that's where the government has to be looking at all of the derivative effects, and not just the government, but, the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, and all of that. This gets me back over here. So, I'm going to finish reading from this. Gosh, it's getting hot in here. By the time the global liberalism shifted into a liberal embrace of globalization, imperial expansion, and unfettered capitalism, the ideals that were part of classical liberalism no longer characterized the liberal class. What endures is not the fact of democratic liberalism, but the myth of it. The myth is used by corporate power elites and their apologists to justify the subjugation and manipulation of other nations in the name of national self-interest and democratic values. Political theorists such as Samuel Huntington wrote about the carcass of democratic liberalism as it was a vibrant philosophical, political, and social force that could be exported abroad. Oh God, sorry, it's very hot in here, and if I put on my air conditioning, you can hear it in the background. Okay. Let's see. The liberal class, cornered and weak, engaged in the politically safe game of attacking the barbarism of communism and later Islamic militancy, rather than attempting to fight the mounting injustices and structural abuses of the corporate state. And this is why we have, the terrorist attack, escalating and everything like that. It's first it was communism the enemy. I mean, one time I said to my mother, who's very right-wing Republican, I said, the communists aren't evil. She was like, oh yes they are, oh yes they are. I was like, they're not evil, it's not even a different form of political necessary. I mean, it became a political platform, but it's actually an economic platform where it's the government who decides everything, the distribution of allocation of resources. And I saw when we went to Cuba what that does. I mean, my Lord, if the capitalists are bad, the communists are even worse. So no, I mean, and it's got to be hybrid. And this is what everybody's understanding.